Great pleasure that Indivisible Pittsfield brings Tahirah to speak to us about her candidacy for the 1st Congressional District. Please welcome Tahirah Amatul.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really not in 5 places at the same time, but it feels like it. Thank you all for coming out. Just as a side note, a couple little side notes. I have surrogates because I have 7 children, and some of them are old enough to drive. And so they've had opportunities to go out to caucuses and things like that for me as campaign aides. So yeah, maybe I am able to be in 5 places at the same time. The youngest one is 4 years old, so she's super cute, but she can't do much other than ask for lollipops and things like that. And my 16-year-old is here, and my sister are here, and they're wonderful. So thank you all again. Thank you, Drew, for having me, for the introduction. Thank you to Indivisible Pittsfield for its great work. After the election of Donald Trump, I think Indivisible was one of the most effective organizations to mobilize, and very organized, and just a great effort, community effort. So I'm grateful to be here and to be able to talk with you all under the invitation. I also want to thank the candidates here who are here today running for various offices, because having a campaign and having candidates and challengers helps to encourage the spirit of democracy and engagement and choice for people. So that is also wonderful. It's a wonderful thing for me to be a part of as a challenger in this race. My name is Tahirah Amatul Wadud. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for almost 12 years. Most of my work is in family court, probate, custody support, visitation, estates, things like that. I'm really lucky in that of all of the counties that I look to serve, I've practiced law in those counties. I've gotten to know the families of all of our communities. I have 7 kids, you heard me mention. I'm the oldest of 10 kids. And I grew up in Springfield. We moved to Springfield in 1984 when I was about 9. I graduated from Helms College and then Western New England University School of Law. And received the Alumni Award last fall from the Dean of the Law School, which meant a lot to me, because when an institution says they support the advocacy and the work that you're doing in the community, I think there's no greater sort of validation. Let's see, I am running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District, which is a large district. It's 3,000 square miles. It's all of Hampden County, all of Berkshire County, parts of Hampshire, parts of Franklin, and a few towns in Worcester County. And I've been all over the district. I launched this campaign December 19th, which was my birthday. And the way we did it was a 3-town tour. So I left my home in Springfield very early in the morning, and I drove up to Shelburne Falls, where David, who's here, and Ken helped to orchestrate a meeting for me to plant my feet there and say the words publicly that I am running and that I will forget nobody and no community. And then we drove for about an hour to Pittsfield, where Shirley, who's here, helped to mobilize a community there at Dottie's. And for the 2nd time in my life and in that day, I planted my feet up in Berkshire County and said the words again. I will forget nobody and no community if you elect me as your Congresswoman. And then we drove to Springfield, back home. And at this point, it was 3 o'clock. Felt like it was 300 o'clock. It was a very long day. And my children were all there. And we gathered. And for the last time that day, I said, we will forget no one and nobody if you elect me to represent you as your Congresswoman. And we've been moving ever since. The reason I ran for this office at this time is because of my work serving the families of Western Massachusetts. I get to see people in their most vulnerable and intimate spaces. As a divorce lawyer, as a civil rights lawyer, I serve as a commissioner on the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. And in that role, We drive all across the Commonwealth, and we conduct open hearings. And in those hearings, people tell you what you need to know from their perspective to serve women and girls and family. And by the end of 2016, things felt particularly desperate for too many people. And there were themes to what I was hearing. And there was a frustration that I was seeing. And frankly, I was tired of people saying that they were still waking up feeling like they had an elephant on their chest from the pressure and the anxiety of what was going to happen with their future and the lack of feeling like they had a champion in their congressional seat. It was real, and it was more than Facebook posts. These were living, breathing people. So I spread everything out on the table. I talked to advisors. We did research. I'm a problem solver, right? I'm the oldest of 10 kids. I have 7 little kids myself, not all little. But I know that I can solve a problem. And the greatest way to make the most significant and most impact was for me to run for this seat at this time. And I started talking about issues that I thought mattered the most to people. And what I'd like for you to do when we turn it over for question and answer, you're free to ask me questions, but I would like for you to also tell me what I need to know. Because what I've learned on the campaign trail is that I'm definitely on the right track. But what means the most to me is when people pull me aside and say, yes, and they give me examples about how their quality of life has suffered and how the issues that I'm talking about would help to resolve that. And if I'm not on the right track, I'm open to hear that as well. So the issues that I thought were the most pressing in this community, we need Medicare for all. We need Medicare for all. And again, working with families who've had the opportunity to benefit from Romney Care, where we were able to relax a little bit and know that there was always going to be some coverage for the spouse or the kids. And then moving into Obamacare, which changed things a little bit, but continued to keep some consistent coverage. And the idea that we're very much aware that that could be slipping through our hands, and that the state may lack the autonomy to be able to control it. This is why we need a strong federal option. Additionally, I have lived experience with why it's important for us to have this care. You may have heard me talk about my 7-year-old daughter, Mahmouda, who's a beautiful little girl, very vibrant and healthy. She just had her 7-year physical this afternoon. Well, she was born with a very rare chronic heart defect. And we brought her to Boston Children's Hospital at 9 weeks old, almost dead. And she had a bumpy recovery, but the one thing that my husband and I didn't have to worry about was how we were going to pay for it and whether we could afford to continue to have her treated. And we did, and she's great. But I know that it's not about if, it's about when you or a family member will suffer with a chronic illness, and you deserve to have the same peace of mind that we had. But we weren't making choices about whether and what we could afford in Mahmouda's care, and because of that, she has a great and bright future. I continue to do some volunteer work for the hospital because how can I repay them for saving her life and stitching her chest up with such care? Side note, the surgeon said to me, I want her to wear a wedding dress or prom dress of her choice. And he spent probably more time stitching her back up than actually doing the open heart surgery. But you could barely see it. All of our children deserve that level of care. I also need to talk about addiction and drugs because it's impacting every family. We talk about the opioid crisis, which is the thing we talk about now. But I would suggest we may be missing the boat on how we have that conversation. We have an opioid crisis, a crack crisis, a cocaine crisis, a heroin crisis. We have disparity in how we treat addiction. between how it's looked at in the black and brown communities versus how it's looked at in the majority community. And until we bring it in close and deal with addiction from a clinical and compassionate point of view and move away from a punitive model, we're not going to solve this problem. Because had we developed this model during the crack epidemic, we would have a solution for the opioid epidemic, or we may not have the opioid epidemic at all. Third, infrastructure. Every elected official or candidate talks about infrastructure, but I have to be a little different, because I like to talk about infrastructure, particularly where I think we are at the greatest risk, and that is the lack of broadband internet in too many of our communities. And I saw a hand go up, so this is one of those validation points. And when I made it one of my issues, one of my primary issues, it wasn't because it impacted me specifically. I'm in Springfield, so I can catch Wi-Fi any place. My office is in Chicopee. It came because I heard what people were saying, and I heard people saying we are neglected and no one's hearing us. And why aren't we in the 21st century? What is it? Berkshire County, 43% of the community lacks high-speed internet. Franklin County, 39% lack high-speed internet. It's a quality of life issue. It's a safety issue. It's an economic prosperity issue. You know what teachers come up to me and say after I talk? When they up in some of the rural areas, they say, I can't give my high schoolers homework because they don't have the ability to do the research. My daughter does a program with inner city gardening. And they had students come, high school students come from the rural communities, farm communities, and she said during the lunch break, the inner city kids jump on their phone and start using different social media apps. But the kids without internet access not only did not have phones, which, you know, if that's your choice, that's your choice, but there's tools that they do not have access to and technology that they cannot use. And that's going to create a gap. And what I'm worried about is that it's a gap that they may not be able to recover from. You cannot have your first consistent access to internet when you're in college. You cannot make up for 15 years of not being online. And if nobody's talking about it, then nobody's priority is to fix it. Our community deserves a citizenry, deserves a servant who will serve its citizenry and fight for all of these issues as if they were her own at that time, whether they are or are not. And that's why I ran, and that's what we're running on. And it's been a wonderful experience. I talked about what it feels like to be a part of democracy. And I'm seeing less of those posts and hearing less of those messages about that sense of hopelessness that we had been hearing. I see people feeling like they can do something, they can be a part of something, they can advance an idea, and someone is there to listen and to be held accountable. We're already winning in this campaign. People love to talk to me about my demographic. Like, okay, so 60% more women running for federal seats this year than last time. Oh, what is it like to be a black woman running for office? What is it like to be a woman and a Muslim running for office? So I'm like, I know all about me, but give me the microphone and let me talk about us. And I take the microphone, as I've learned in my media training, and I've answered the question that I want to answer. And I talk about why our communities are underserved and what that does to the children and the families here. And for the first time, probably in forever, the issues impacting Western Massachusetts are being discussed nationally because this campaign gets picked up all across the country and up in Boston and what have you. So we're already winning. We're already being heard, and it's wonderful. So that's sort of my reflection. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to share. Sometimes I like to tell people things that I don't always talk about publicly. Let's see. I consider the past 3 months sort of the introduction phase of the campaign, where I get to meet people and engage and introduce myself. But we are slowly, but quite effectively, moving into the policy proposal part of the campaign, which is going to be fun, where we'll be issuing policy statements and what I will do when statements. So make sure you sign up on the website and get some access and some early and exclusive access. I'm not going to take up all the time. I'll let you all ask questions, but one of those, an example of that strategy was executed this past week when the campaign issued a statement addressing the seniority of the sitting congressman, because it is a question that I get on the campaign trail. And just to frame the issue for those who might not be familiar with it, the sitting congressman is a member of the Ways and Means Committee. And people say, well, if the House turns blue and he is still in office, he will have the opportunity to serve as chair of that powerful committee. And if that happens, it'll be great for us because we will get stuff. There's literally what people say, we'll get things, right? So my answer to that, and I encourage you to look at it on the website, it's also been one of the stories covered throughout the Commonwealth, is this. If the current congressman is unable to serve for whatever reason, resigns, retires, gets sick, gets elected out, life goes on. If he is not able to serve, and you all elect me, who is in succession in the Ways and Means Committee, is next John Lewis, civil rights icon. Yeah, good choice, right? Yeah. Lloyd Doggett of Texas is also a consideration. And the Democratic Party would be in great hands with either of those two representatives at the helm. And the 1st Congressional District would be in great hands with me here and in DC. The other thing you should know, and check out the statement for more details, but when you look at a responsibility such as Ways and Means and how monies are allocated, you should feel the way I do and question, why is it then that of the 9 congressional districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, ours is dead last in median income? With the longest tenured congressman, shouldn't our district be the most on-point district in the country? Why do we have a higher than average unemployment rate? Why do we have higher than average adults uninsured? He has issues around trade and some decisions that I propose expedited the death of manufacturing in Western Massachusetts. Check it out. And donations from large corporate donors, which I believe presents an inherent conflict of interest when you are funded by entities whose interests are directly adverse to those of your constituents. You can't do it. Not with the values that I have. So those are some of the points that I wanted to talk with you all about and share little tidbits. Everybody gets a little bit of a different insight into what's in my brain and happening that week. So please let me know what's on your mind. Questions? Yes.
I'll just make a comment. Berkshire County especially, BRTA is Berkshire Regional Transportation Agency.
Okay.
We need transportation funding desperately, especially for the disabled and the elderly, because that's a huge part of our population.
Yes. I had an opportunity to sit in on Day of Action activities, probably the last week of February, where there was some amplification around the cuts to public transportation. And I know that the state legislature is on it and looking at it as a priority, but you're right. the lack of public transportation funding disproportionately impacts poor people, disabled people, and people of color. The most vulnerable. The most vulnerable. So I hear you on that.
And they're talking about a high-speed rail to New York City, which is great, right? And to Boston. But we need buses. We need B buses and we need purple buses.
And we need them because they're here. We just have to believe that they're worth investing in. The high-speed rail I support east to west, but that has to be built. We already have access to and buses and routes for those areas that you're talking about, and we need to value them enough to keep them funded so that people can use them. You're welcome. Yes.
I'm wondering what how you're going to raise money for your campaign. I can just imagine the money that Richie Neal has and who he's going to get it from, as you alluded to. And I also wondered if your campaign is focusing on getting out the vote with young people especially.
Oh yeah, those are good questions. So if anybody's familiar with opensecrets.org, anybody ever go on opensecrets.org? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can go on that website and you can find out how your elected official is funded and what industries and organizations and PACs fund your elected official. And follow what happens and what has happened on policy or not with respect to what industries would be most impacted, right, by some aggressive advocacy. So my campaign has been funded by the people. And our FEC report is due to be filed on the 15th, and I'm working with the treasurer now to make sure that we have everything. This is our first quarter of 2018, our first full quarter. It's new to all of us. We filed one after we launched in December, but that was only representative of a couple of weeks. And I don't know what the numbers are, and we'll issue a statement on that. It's not millions of dollars, but it's enough to do what we need to do. And it's enough to pay for the things that we need to access. And I am aggressively, and the team is aggressively, continuing to fundraise and ask people to support the campaign if this models what you need and what you believe in. And that's what's happening. And I think with each month that goes on, we're going to get stronger and stronger. You asked the second question. Oh, get out the vote for young people. Definitely. Listen, I just talked a little bit about, without saying the words, systemic and institutional oppression. So is voter suppression. And I have not been shy about telling our young people that not only do they need to vote, but they have to be very conscious about making sure that they get out and vote, because there is a system designed to want to box a lot of us out from that. So instead of just saying get out the vote, we are going to have sort of a parallel campaign calling on the public sector and the private sector and educators and everybody across all industries to take a pledge to make it possible for those in their circles to get 15 or 20 or 30 minutes to go and vote, to do public service campaigns, and to really push the awareness around the September 4th, particularly the September 4th primary. I mean, give me a break. It's the day after the holiday. Students will be back in school if they've gone away to school. Kids who are here they'll be their first day of school for some of them. Families may still be on vacation. It's designed to make it so that working families cannot vote easily. So we have to counter and push that. But that's what's true of every aspect of our lives. We're always pushing against the system a little bit because the system isn't designed to serve us. It's designed to serve the elite. Yes.
I'd like to suggest that you shine a light on where Richie Neal gets his money. And it's funny, I went to Open Secrets just a moment before you said that. His two top contributors are the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical.
Yes, the
industry,
pharmaceutical.
He's going to stop us from getting Medicare from all, and you would be helping us.
That's right.
That's a very specific point that we should say loud and clear. And are there other specific points and where he's getting his money that you would like to say?
Yes, war profiteers also. So when you look, so what our friend has said, for those who may not have been able to hear it, is that he went on Open Secrets and recognize that the congressman has two major funding sources, that's Big Pharma and the insurance industry. And what he's alluding to is that when you are funded that way, it will make you less inclined to embrace a Medicare for all or any sort of large transformational change to healthcare. Am I correct? And it's true. And what I was responding also was that there are manufacturers of war weapons who also fund him. That's another large component of his funding source. And when we think about conflict and what's happening across our world, we know that manufacturers of weapons of war make money when we are at war. So we just got to be very careful. And we will be rolling it out and spelling it all out very carefully for you over the next couple of weeks. You will be astonished. Yes.
Either as, excuse me, a Massachusetts resident or hopefully a congressperson, what's your position on Safe Communities Act that's in the legislature right now?
I support, it's funny because it depends on the vernacular and how we're using words like sanctuary city or the safe communities. I support the autonomy of a city to decide how it wants to interact with its federal law enforcement. I mean, bottom line, that's what it boils down to. It's not about breaking laws. It's not about harboring fugitives. It's about setting parameters and protocols for how we engage with members of law enforcement. And I support a community's right to do that. And I support the legislation, particularly. Yes.
So one thing I never understood, and maybe I missed it, but during the conversation around the ACA, is there was no real discussion or substantive discussion around the kind of health insurance that people in Congress receive, and I've always been curious about that. What as we move forward, shouldn't the American people be entitled to the same level of care and insurance as our people in Congress and the Senate, who really are our employees to some extent? And how do we get people to talk about that and consider that? I mean, I can see why it wasn't probably in the best interest of a lot of people to bring it up.
So I don't know specifics about the medical coverage that congressional representatives and senators get necessarily. But I lead from the philosophy that congresswomen and men, congresspeople, senators, and any elected official is a servant of the people. They are not above the people. And so we should all be on the same level with respect to what we get for health care. It makes sense to me. It makes sense. And how can you not be in touch? How can you afford not to be in touch with the people? If you don't have a worry, if you have millions of dollars, you're just out of touch. And particularly for our district, and I just told you the statistics, I'm very much in touch. And I get it. The status quo is failing people. For some people it's working, but many people are afraid that is failing them and their children or grandchildren, and so we do have to change our attitudes about our elected officials and what they should be entitled to. I saw hands go up.
So, coupled with the comments on the need for transportation in our county, the other piece of that I think is a sister issue to it is affordable housing, both workforce housing and affordable housing. And the housing stock in Massachusetts is anemic right now, and so and grants coming from HUD and from federal sources are down. So in terms of advocacy that we need in Washington, I think is both access to good transportation and access to affordable housing, because otherwise it continues to put those who need that support behind the eight ball constantly.
All the time.
That and a question, which is that you started by remarking that our district is a large one. The first district is geographically large. So what's your plan for keeping your pulse on the finger of the district?
Yes.
For your finger on the pulse of the district.
I know exactly what you were saying. So in addition to being purposeful about where I spend my time, I'm reading a lot, I'm in touch with people throughout the district a lot. I've also started a little bit of an initiative where I'm encouraging community members to travel with me throughout the district. So if people are from the rural communities, I'm asking them to come with me to sit in on a meeting in Hampden County. Let's say there's a discussion about schools in Holyoke. And I'm asking my friends in the rural district, just come sit and listen. And I'm asking my friends from Hampden County to go up and sit in Shelburne Falls and hear a discussion about the needs of rural schools in terms of fiscal and funding. Because what we have to do is not only hear what's happening throughout the district, but to get the entire constituent base to also understand and hear that our problems are generally the same. Our goals and hopes for the future are generally the same. They just manifest themselves differently. And I'm personally learning a lot, and I think I'll have a PhD by the time this is all said and done. I will know everything about this community, and hopefully, more importantly, will help to unite the community. Because the federal government looks at us as one neighborhood. Literally, it looks at us as one neighborhood. And so when we act like one neighborhood and realize that we're one neighborhood, the myths that seep in and take up space about, oh, Springfield gets everything, oh, the rural communities get this, or those myths go away and we're able to prosper. So that's what I'm doing, to keep my finger on the pulse. Yeah, yes, Drew.
On the November ballot, there's a measure that would roll back transgender rights in Massachusetts. I asked you the same question when you planted your feet at Dottie's earlier to announce your campaign. I think, where do you stand on LGBTQ equality as opposed to the so-called religious freedom push that's happening from the White House?
Yeah, I don't support the religious freedom push. And just to frame the issue, it's essentially a rule that would allow people to opt out from having to serve someone because of their own religious beliefs. Did I frame that right? Regarding LGBT rights and what have you, I support the rights of all of our community, regardless of gender and orientation, what have you. But as a lawyer, I actually have receipts for actually having supported the rights across the board of all of our community, including defending the parental rights of same-sex couples and having been assigned to assist a minor child on working through some paperwork in court pertaining to their preferred gender identity. So, yes, it matters.
I'm involved in the campaign for paid family leave and for the Fight for 15, and to put these on the ballot for Massachusetts for 2018. And these are issues that haven't been getting such traction on the national level, so states are addressing them on the state level. And you know, these are important issues, but can be challenging for our district because of the economic challenges that employers may say that this is hard on me when it's a difficult economic situation. So I'm curious what your perspective is on those and how you would frame those for our district in particular.
Yes. Are you working with or working parallel to Raise Up Massachusetts?
Yeah, I'm working with that.
Yes. I had an opportunity to sit on a listening meeting in Springfield a couple of weeks ago. And I, of course, would support those laws because they support working class families and poor families, frankly. Part of the thing that we cannot ignore is that in my estimation, one of the reasons we have low housing market values and lack of business development, we cannot underestimate the role that lack of internet plays in that, particularly more so here than in Hampden County. So when a business says, I'm just not making enough, it could be right. It could be right. But we have to give the businesses the tools that they need in order to prosper. We have to give people a reason to purchase homes here in our communities. And so I do support increasing the minimum wage, and I do support paid family medical leave. And in some of my work as a commissioner, I've advocated in both at Beacon Hill for some of those laws, and then also in DC for other aspects of laws supporting families. Thank you. Yes.
So on Saturday night, I asked you a question about the ending of forced arbitration for sexual harassment cases.
Yes.
Have you had time to research that, and how do you support ending the forced arbitration that many companies require for sexual harassment?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to do my homework on that since Saturday night. Just if anybody didn't hear, we had a conversation on Saturday night about whether employees who settle a dispute with their employer should be forced into arbitration. And then, of course, from the outcome of arbitration is a settlement, and what my thoughts are on that. And I haven't had the opportunity to thoroughly brief myself on it, but I'd be very interested to not only look at it from a federal perspective, but also from a state perspective, because in my experience, Massachusetts does tend to be a little hands-on and protective of employee rights. So I'd like to do my homework a little bit more before I go into that conversation, and then you and I will talk more about it. Yes.
You've pretty much touched on already, what I'm going to talk about. And before I go any further, take a look around here. Without any disrespect for our senior citizens, because I'm an investigator for Berkshire Hathaway Protective Services, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. What do you do exactly to get the youth much more involved? Because I don't believe you have many people here who are under 30 tonight. So how do we encourage them exactly? Isn't it time for all of us, to be involved at some level? Parents here, we have nieces, we have daughters, we have anybody. I mean, we can start talking to them. And at the same time, I'm not blaming this youth for not getting involved into our politics. Look at this area. It's economically challenged, and it's been for years. Maybe the youth is tired of hearing promises from politicians, that is not coming. All of the big companies have moved out of this area. Therefore, the economic here is basically relying only, if I'm not mistaken, on tourism. At the same time, this industry is not paying enough. You cannot have only one job and be able to either support yourself or your family. You cannot. Wherever you go, and hotels are growing everywhere like flowers. Who is getting something out of this? I think we're losing a lot. So again, if we can do something to get this youth involved, maybe perspectives might change a little bit.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And in what will probably start to happen with respect to me and the campaign is that you'll start to see me less in these sorts of forums, because I'm going to change from these shoes and I'm going to put on sneakers and I'll be going to the people. And that means speaking with the youth. And I've already heard it. I've already heard people say, young people under 30, when I say, why aren't you, first off, are you registered to vote? No. Usually the question is, do you want to sign my nomination forms? And then I say, you need to be registered to vote. And they say, no, I'm not registered to vote. Why aren't you? There's never really a good answer. But it's because they've checked out. They don't feel like the system is for them or with them. But these are people that quickly I can connect with and say, everything about your life is political. How many hours you work a day, whether your child can afford daycare, how much food is going to cost. Everything about your life is political. Don't give up your right to help shape that. And that usually will get me a registration form filled out. Those conversations take time. They're not as easy as just saying to someone, can you sign my nomination form? I have to, one, develop a relationship, trust, and then close the deal. And that's just on securing their ability to register to vote. But it's worth it, and you are right. We have to do it across the board. We have to get all of our nieces, our cousins, their children, my son's kids, my son's friends. My sons are 24 and 20. My daughter's friends, and say this is a way that you invest in your future. Whether or not you get the Pell Grant, Depends on who's sitting in office, right? Whether you get an extra $100 for books depends on whether lawmakers value that for you, that amount of money is important. I used to get a grant when I graduated college in '98, but I used to get this grant through the state that gave me an extra $500 if I had a 3.0. And of course, I had a 3.0, that wasn't the problem, but as I became an adult, I realized that extra $500 really mattered. And I'm glad that we had elected officials that knew, and then you had to be low income, and so, yeah, there were a couple of things that made me appreciate that having good lawmakers in office made a real life impact. And this is how we convey to the youth that their involvement matters. There are all these stories now after the march about youth registering to vote, and we'll vote them out, and hopefully we can see that change even in our own communities here. Yes.
Just doing the same connection. The young people are really rallying around reducing gun violence. You didn't have a chance to speak publicly Saturday night at the town hall. One of the aspects of that was brought up by a member of the audience is that gun violence in communities of color has been endemic, and it's not because they're communities of color, it's because it's been ignored as public policy. Now that the white communities are being affected, suddenly we're mobilizing. I know this is a big question, but where do you stand on the Second Amendment versus having your kids come home alive from high school?
I think the question's not mutually exclusive. I support that we have a Second Amendment. I support that we don't criminalize legal gun owners or vilify the mentally ill and say, well, you know what, it's their fault. My husband is a gun owner, and I've taken classes in gun safety. I don't particularly care to manage a firearm, but we support gun reform. We have children who are involved in those drills just like everybody else's kids. And I don't like it when they come home talking about a code red and what we do if somebody comes into our classroom. My daughter engaged in a walkout at her school, and when I dropped her off that day when kids around the country were engaging in walkout, my heart skipped a beat. Because all I could think of is, what if something happens to her? And she gave a speech, and she had policy asks. And I was like, oh, let me see. Let me see your notes. So what I'm doing on gun reform is I'm listening very closely, and I'm speaking to students and families and gun owners to say, where do we agree and where do we disagree? So I can tell you early in the development of our policy, I support raising the age. I support a universal background check. I'm very much supportive of thoroughly vetting and keeping track of systems where those who are prone to violence can be tracked. And that comes informed from my work as a family law attorney, where many of my clients have experience as domestic violence victims. And I know the rates of domestic violence and handgun use. I support looking not just at banning assault weapons, because to me that's cliche and that's kind of verbiage depending on who you're talking with. But what my husband, the gun owner, says is, don't just look at those two words. Be careful and intentional about how you define assault weapons, because there are characteristics and accessories that might make a firearm even more dangerous than assault weapons, and you've missed the opportunity to cut off the danger. So just like the conversation that I just had around the opioid crisis and looking at things through various lenses, so will we with this conversation, because it's important enough that it deserves our greatest care. Our children deserve to feel safe. Parents deserve to feel confident that their kids will come home, and they deserve to actually be safe. And that's a big order.
I also want to add that on Saturday night we had the town hall meetings, and Tahirah was not able to actually sit on our panel because it was only elected officials. due to the charity we were working with. But afterwards, she sat down with the student organizers and the student volunteers. So if you're wondering about her commitment to working with the youth and getting them involved, she is very committed to that. She sat down with them for about a half hour and listened to their ideas and gave them some pointers.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I
so she
appreciate
was
you
thinking
sharing that.
herself.
I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And thank you for doing such a great job facilitating and moderating and encouraging the youth, because you gave them life and helped make that possible. So I admire that. I know. Yes.
At a recent town hall meeting, Richie Neal explained to me from the podium that frac methane gas is a bridge fuel. Can you explain how you differ on your energy and environmental policy?
Yes. These questions start to become a framework for them, which is follow the money, follow who's funding, follow who benefits from it. And of course I support green energy. I'm again, like gun reform and our policies that we're going to lay out, we will be issuing a statement overall on our climate justice position. At this point, anyone who would take the position that you would say doesn't have sort of the foresight that this community deserves to have in terms of looking for innovative ways to bring alternatives into our systems and into our lives. I was speaking to someone recently about, we were talking about like making solar panels available for low-income people as an option, and we're like, well, it's very, very expensive. You all know it's very expensive. It's not an option that people can always afford. But if there are programs that allow for fuel assistance and other programs that give some help to low-income people, then why can't we make solar panels part of the option and consider it an investment, because in the long run it pays off. So I'm all about looking at it from a holistic point of view and working again to develop the policy so that I have a strong proposal that we can actually see executed, but know that my values will allow me to lead with an eye for green energy and climate justice, which is all sorts of justice. It's economic justice, it's racial justice, it's so many things. Oh, there's hands going up. Want me to take it from this side just because she hasn't asked yet? And I know it is at 6:30, so.
That's okay, we set the whole till 7.
Okay.
So, one of the things that seems to be causing a lot of difficulty is that you have people who are more towards the liberal end of the spectrum, you have people who are more towards the conservative end of the spectrum, and they're sort of walking in parallel, and nobody is engaging. Nobody's saying, okay, what do we have in common and how can we work together towards a common good? I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we can approach that.
You know, I'm a lawyer. I'm a litigator, which means that I'm in front of judges, either fighting or putting on trials to get the judge to rule in my client's favors, usually over economic situations in a family or custody issues in a family. And I'm really good at being a litigator. I love being in court. But you know what else I am? I'm a conciliator, meaning that I live from a conciliatory space as well. So when we have families who may really be at odds for whatever reason, a lot of time there is commonality that if we remove the emotion from here and think about it here, we can sit down, and if we can't get agreement on everything, we will square away the areas upon which we can get agreement. When I was driving up this afternoon, I said, you know, broadband internet is a global issue, regardless of what party you're with. It's a global issue. Health insurance is a global issue. So if you put parties and labels aside, can we come together over something like that? Can we come together over how we will deal with health insurance? And do we need to really parse out where we have agreement, where we have disagreement, and sort of mobilize around where we're winning, yeah, it's very possible. And again, I'm not afraid to do it, because when you have fresh blood in a seat like that, you are beholden to no one but the people you serve. And I feel that I'd be able to come home every week and say, look, everybody, either we got this done or we fought like hell trying. That's all people want. They want to see you try. They want to see you get results, but they most importantly want to see that you understand the issues and that you tried. Yes.
Okay, two things. One, is there any rumors about who might be a Republican candidate to run against in this seat?
I haven't heard anything, and the one rumor I heard very early sort of fizzled out, and I don't even know the person's name.
And then second, okay, so I lived over in Greenfield, Franklin County, for about a decade, and to go to GCC, a community college, there were already jobs, either in Franklin County or Hampden, New Hampshire. But since living in North Adams and Pittsfield, MCLA and BCC students, they have to leave to be employed. They can't afford public transportation, access to high-speed internet. They need jobs that pay enough to pay for health insurance and student loans. So how do we get that here so millennials, so any graduating high school student has a reason to stay and not leave?
Yeah. First, you talk about the issue, amplify the issue, and hire, elect people who understand and believe that it is an issue. I think all of your concerns are very valid, which is why I'm standing here. I don't want my children leaving because they don't have access to internet. They should stay here and bring their lights and the things that they've developed here. Yes.
Well, the one thing I want to say about access to broadband is that the plan that they currently have for this state is totally ineffectual for the underserved communities, one of which is where I live. I have a frank admission, well, first we're supposed to create our own infrastructure, and then somebody will come in and provide the services. And I have frank admissions from people in our town who would be doing this, that they are never, it's the town of Worthington, they are never going to string fiber optic cable to my house because of my location. They said, we will do it wirelessly or something like that, to which I said, and where is the modem and the router going to be that have to get reset periodically? Who's got it? Who's going to reset it? Or do you really expect me to do what many people currently do, which is drive out to the library in no matter what weather, sit in your car and attempt to get a connection? I have a business that I lost, 5-6 years ago. I lost a client for which I billed this client about $20,000 a year. I lost the client because it was cheaper for them to scan their data, send it to Boston, somebody there would do everything necessary and send it back to them. And all I had at the time was dial-up. So there's no way I could compete. Now I have a satellite dish. But I have been doing payroll for people and said to them, I need you to tell me when you're leaving today because it's snowing and I could lose this connection in a second. And my connection is to their computers to run the payroll through their system. So it's like, tell me when you're leaving and I'm just gonna clock you out and do this now. And some guy in my town said to me, oh, but broadband, kids use their phone. Everybody's gonna use their phone. To which I said, here, you show me how you do somebody's payroll on my telephone. Because you can't.
You can't. And so you validate the point.
But the current plan sucks.
Yeah. And local communities are doing their best to put Band-Aids on it, but really this needs the force of the federal government. This needs funding from the different options that the federal government has. And again, this is one of those situations where if your value is there, then you will push for it. And until we look and address this as a federal issue, including looking at making providers, putting them on the same level as public utility services, then again, we're not going to be able to go there. And then when you check out Open Secrets, let's see how many of our elected officials are being funded by the telecommunications industry. Yes.
When you talk about people in different parts of Western Mass understanding the issues, that is definitely one issue that people don't understand.
Yes.
I can drive from Worthington into Northampton and tell them that I don't get cell phone coverage or cable or DSL or anything, and they'll look at me like I'm crazy. That's 40 minutes away. Springfield, like I work with the deaf community, and I have to go through the whole thing. No, there are no wires. I can't, and that's another issue that people don't really connect with the high speed issue.
Right.
Is that the deaf community uses video phones, and that requires high speed.
Yes.
So if a deaf person who uses ASL and uses video phones lived where I would live, they'd be screwed, because we pay through the nose to get satellite, but that is not fast enough to have two-way video. So it's a disability issue as well as a general access economic issue.
And it compounds the isolation.
Right.
It compounds the isolation. So I understand. Thank you for that. I think maybe we're good. Are we good? Yes.
Are you pro-choice?
Yes, I support a woman's right to make whatever medical decision she needs to make with her doctor. I also support women's health in every aspect of their care, including making sure that we have clinical trials that are respective of the fact that our bodies are different, that we have, that we have good care for maternal fetal health, because our numbers aren't looking so positive around that here in Massachusetts. So I look at it as a general approach to dealing with all aspects of women's health and prioritizing our bodies and our needs all across our organs and what have you. So thank you all for having me this evening. It has been great. If you want to get in touch with the campaign, it's tahirahforcongress.com, and it's a hashtag and a handle all across social media. And I'm relatively accessible, and I have a large team, volunteers, and we're going to be creating sort of an internship program for high schoolers and college students coming to work when they get out of school for the summer and the spring. I want that experience to be very meaningful for them. So if you know people who are interested, let me know, because we have somebody coming in who's just going to handle and take care of them and make sure that they have a great experience on the campaign if they come to work for us. So thank you. So yeah, I'll give you some more exclusive information. So thank you again, and thank you, Drew.
Drew, can I tell people what's going on with the Indivisible Match?
Hang on just a second. So Tahirah and her support team will be in the back there. If you haven't signed her petition or you need some more information. Now, signing the petition is just to get her name on the ballot. It doesn't say you're going to vote for her, that you have that option. It's just to make sure we have choices on the ballot, very important. You're going to be seeing a lot of people getting signatures, because I believe May something is the deadline for the primary, so there's a lot of push on there. We've got the hall until 7, so you have time to talk to here about other issues. Make sure to give other people a chance, kind of thing. So really interesting. It's the national and the Massachusetts Indivisible are coming up with ways that we can, as a,
you want me to explain what's
come on
happening?
up. How